Hey everyone, and welcome back to another Wargaming terrain tutorial. This week I wanted to show you a quick tip for your existing buildings or for new buildings that you plan on doing. It was something I wasn't able to throw into last week's video as it was already a little bit too long. But what I'm going to do is show you how to make these really simple downpipes. Now, as I mentioned, that these can be added to buildings you've already previously built. They go together really easily and are a simple addition to existing buildings, which I'll show you towards the end of the video. I hope you enjoy this one. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe, and I'll have more videos coming out soon. Let's get started. Alright, so just a quick shout out to my Patreons. Thank you very much for your support. Now for this build, we are just going to use some lollipop sticks that I found here. Now all these materials that I'm using today I did find at the dollar store. You can see I've got a toothpick here as well. One or two of those should be fine, you don't need a lot. I'll get some super glue and also some of this thin wire, which I found at the dollar store as well. I have used that before. Now for the lollipop sticks, you'll find that these are pretty smooth and pretty glossy, which just means they're not going to take the paint very well. I mean, it's not too bad if you're using a rattle can to prime. It'll probably stick to those fine. I just found giving it a quick hit with some sandpaper roughed up that surface a little bit. Now for the bottom of our drain pipe here, what we want is a small angled cut so that we can get that outlet on there nice. Now you don't want a 45-degree cut here. I would suggest just playing around. I mean, these things are super cheap. I've got 100 of them now, so there's no worries about wasting them. But just have a play around. You get a few little different bits and put them in place to see what works best and what's going to glue on to the bottom of this one and give you the look you want. You can see in the photos that I've done a couple of these now, and they work out really well. So one thing I do want in these in this drain pipe is going to be a few joins. So you don't have to do this by any means. I found it was pretty good. It gave a pretty decent look. What you will find is with the super glue, when it hardens, there'll be a little bit of an overflow of that glue, and it does kind of give it a bit of a look like it's a welded joint as well. So it looks pretty good. Now for the toothpick, I'm going to break this one up into smaller pieces. The great thing about these toothpicks I found is that they fit perfectly inside the lollipop sticks that we've got here. Now you don't need to cut them professionally. You can see I just broke them up. It worked fine. Just make sure your two ends are going to go together pretty nicely. You want to make sure that it is still a straight pipe, more or less. You don't want it to be overemphasized, the bends or welds in this one. It won't matter too much if it's a little bit off. It'll all sort of come out in the wash at the end when we attach it to the building. You can see there I just put a toothpick in there and a small bead of super glue, and then just press those together. Now make sure you are using a decent super glue for this, just because I did find I had one that was really thin and it didn't bind so well. So the stuff I've got here is the cheapest stuff I could find actually, but it worked the best. So the super thin glue didn't work so well. Same with the plastic glue, it didn't work great either. Now when it comes to sticking on the angled end on this pipe, it was a little bit trickier. So obviously you can't just sort of put it on and leave it. You've got to kind of hold it there for a few seconds depending on the drying time of your glue. You want to try and get this set nicely in a good spot. Once it's on there, it's on there. But if you've got a semi-decent glue that dries pretty quickly, you shouldn't have any real issues with that. Now that pipe is essentially ready to go, so you want to obviously measure this up against your building to make sure that it is going to fit. You can trim it later on down the track, but I found with those joints it's still a little bit fragile even though we've super glued it in there. So if you try to manhandle it too much down the track, you might find it breaking as you're trying to cut through. So I've just cut a bit of a crooked end on the end of that pipe as well to show that it has broken off. Now I'm just getting a couple of inches of wire and making some U-shapes. Now that's just to make it easier to tie this onto the pipe. So as you can see here, all I'm going to do is get that wire, that U-shaped wire. I'm going to put it around our downpipe, and I'm just going to give it a little bit of a twist. Now the trick here is you want this to be tightly bound around that pipe, so you don't want this piece of wire to be sort of moving up and down or free on that pipe. So you want it to be able to be bound pretty tight, and that's where I found these pliers were the best way to go. So you give it a couple of twists with your hand first, just to get it started, and then a pair of pliers, and you can twist that really tightly around that around that joint on the pipe so that it won't slide up and down on the pipe once you've got it on there. So as you can see there, that's nice and tight. It's not going to move freely on there. So once you get those 3 in place, you can use as many as you like. For me, I found that this was just the right amount, and I've pretty much placed them where I had those joints in the plastic anyway. So you just want to trim off those twisted ends there. You want to leave a bit extra at this point because you want to make sure that you've got plenty there for this to stick into the building. So I will trim these up again to make them a little bit shorter very shortly. But yeah, give yourself a little bit extra rather than a little bit less at this point, just so that you make sure that you can actually get this attached to the building without any trouble. Now, the one thing I did find is that even though I used the pliers, these were still a little bit loose, and I wasn't overly confident that they would hold in place properly over time. So I'm just going to put a little drop of super glue onto these joints as well, and just make sure that you do have your pipe orientated correctly so that those are faced at the back, so at the opposite side to where your outlet is at the bottom of this pipe. So you want those to be straight out the back. Now I give these a quick prime with some primer through my airbrush. Like I said, you can rattle can these, will be fine as well, there's no trouble with that. If you haven't got the sandpaper to give them a scuff up, you might just need to give it a few extra coats, that's all. Now this is the ruined building I did first, so this was a few weeks back, the small ruined building I did, and I wanted to add on a pipe. It's just a really nice little extra detail for these types of buildings. Now if you've built them out of foam board as I have, there's no trouble to apply these to existing buildings that you've made. So what I do first is just measure it up against the building, make sure it's going to fit correctly and it looks okay, get it in the spot you want, and then you just want to press in these wires that we've made, and you want to make sure at this point that you don't push them all the way through the walls. So this would be a good time to trim them up to make sure that they are going to sit in the right spot where you want them to without pressing right through the inner wall, and just get it in place there. Make sure it's where you want it, it's straight and in the right spot. Next thing we'll do is just quickly grab some PVA glue and just add that to those little wires there, so that when we push it into the foam board it will hold in place and not fall out over time. So I find the best way here is just with your finger, just put a drop of glue on a piece of cardboard or scraps and then just wipe the glue onto these joints here. And you should have those holes already in your building now, because we did the dry fit, so you should have no trouble just pushing this straight in. That PVA glue will dry clear, so it doesn't matter if there's a bit extra that comes out, you won't see it at the end. Now at this point I haven't given this the final paint job. You certainly could give it a full paint job before you put it on the building. I've only worried about priming at this stage so that I can go back now and give it the paint job I want for the finished product. So here you can see on the large building I did last week, this one's all painted up and in place. I've actually got 2 on this building, one on the front corner and one on the rear corner on the adjacent side. And I think these look really good. They're really simple to make up and they make a big difference to your building. So I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial, and I will have another one out very shortly. Thanks very much for watching. Remember to like and subscribe if you've enjoyed the video, and I will be back very shortly with another one. Thanks guys.